Hello. Oh shit. Well, this is Alan Riemann, CEO of the Synapse Electrocutal Company, and ex-Marine. So, thank you for your service and thank you for speaking today. And it's off to you.
Good morning. I have to confess that up until a couple of days ago, I didn't even know you guys existed, and I'm really thrilled to know what's going on in this type of a school and the level of education and opportunity that wasn't available years ago when I was your age. So today's going to be maybe a little bit different. I am a serial entrepreneur. As some of you noted, I was in the service. When I was just a little bit older than you, I was up to my eyeballs in rice paddies in Vietnam, but we can just brush on beyond that. What I'd like to talk about today is just some things I've learned along the way in starting multiple companies, and then at the end of that, maybe walk you through, if we have time, the experience of my very first venture, and then if you have questions about what I'm currently doing, I'll be happy to answer those questions. I wanted to talk a little bit today about what I call organizational philosophy. So, what is philosophy? Everybody has their own definition of different words. Organizational philosophy, for me, is what I've learned over a lifetime of building on companies and things that I wish I'd have known before I had to learn them from the school of hard knocks. Experience is very expensive, and if you can shorten that a little bit, you can move forward a lot more rapidly and with less errors in judgment. So, if you would, every day is a brick in the foundation of your life. So you have to view each day as part of that foundation, and especially at your age, if any of those bricks are soft, you have a soft foundation, and you're going to have to go back and fill that in someday. So take advantage of every day of your life. Learn to get from the day, not through the day. There's so many people that go through school, and in their mindset is, man, if I can just get through high school, and then it's if I can just get to college, then if I can just get through college, and they're always looking ahead of what's valuable, what my life is going to be like when I finish this. I think that we've got a whole different audience here. I think you folks are really zeroed in on the right thing, and that's what can I get from each day, and you're building a very solid foundation. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about what I found to be what I call organizational philosophy. If I can get this thing to work, that'll be great. Okay, different key?
No, there was a little error in the bottom.
Okay. So, building blocks required to create a culture of productivity and results. At the end of the day, when you're running a company, what you want to see is productivity from your people, and you need to start with some level of foundation. So, a couple of years back, I was doing some consulting work for an industrial instrument company. And I found that all the people that I brought into the organization to add to the people that were there when I got there had different mindsets and different philosophies. And so I was talking to the board, and I said, what I think we ought to do is we ought to read a book so we have some common foundation. And my favorite book is called Execution, The Discipline of Getting Things Done by Sharon and Bossidy. But the guy on the board says, his favorite book was Good to Great. So one day a week, we would meet in the break room on Thursdays, and we'd go over a chapter of the book, Good to Great. And we got done with that book, and I said, so what'd you guys get out of all this? And they scratched their head and said, we probably ought to get to good before we start worrying about getting to great. So I just put together a list of books that I've read. When I walk into my office where my library is, I feel smarter just being in the presence of all those books. And I started with the Bible, and the reason is there's a lot of good business information in the Bible. Does anybody know the story of the talents? The parable of the talents? So I'll make it really quick. So apparently the master is going to go away on a cruise with his wife and have a good time, and so he assigns some of his managers some specific tasks. And he says to one, here's 20 talents. Well, talent is a measure of money back in biblical times. So here's 20 talents. You know, you take care of that, you manage that while I'm gone. And he gave another one 10 and another one 5. So he comes back, and so now he's checking. How did they do? And the first one says, sir, you gave me 20, I'm giving you back 40. He said, good job. Talk to the next one. I gave you 20, or I gave you 10, I'm giving you back 20. Good job. The last one said, sir, I know you are a very strict master and don't like to lose anything, so I buried it. Here's back what you gave me. And he chastises that servant. He said, you know, you're useless. You didn't do anything with my investments. Now, the point that I take away from that is that you have God-given talents, and understanding what those talents are at an early age and building upon that is key. I was blessed when our son was 7 years old. I'm driving down Highway 8 with my wife. We were going to go visit the grandparents, and our son announced from the back seat, well, I figured out what I'm going to do. And I'm thinking, okay, buddy, you're going to tell me what you're going to do when you get to the grandparents' house. And he said, I want to be an architect, I want to play football, and I want to go to Notre Dame. And he accomplished all 3 of those. Now, this was at age 7. You know, I didn't figure out what I was going to do for a long time in my life. So you guys have a heads up here. You're in a unique place. So anyway, I encourage you to get some books, read them, highlight them, use your yellow marker, and manage those things. Now, some rules for today. I noticed nobody has notepads out, which is terrific. I don't want you to take notes, but maybe, you know, along the way, maybe you'll get a little pearl of wisdom and you capture that idea. So other stuff I think is very important that I've learned in my business life is, one, keep a journal. It's worthwhile going back because things will repeat themselves in your life and you go, wait a minute, didn't I cover that ground? Okay, how did I address that issue the last time? So it's important to be able to look back and save some level of energy. And another thing is keep a glossary of terms. Nobody can keep up with terminology today. So any word that you hear that you don't understand, write it down, look it up, because that's going to help you build a common language for those that you want to do business with. Okay, come on here. Really? Okay, I just want to advance it one at a time.
Okay. You can use actually the arrow keys. There you go.
Okay. We'll start there. So major questions in life, you guys have probably all heard these, the who, what, when, where, how, and why. Well, you know who the who is because you look at that person every day in the mirror. So the what, when, where, how, and why, probably the most important thing is the why. You're going to figure out what you want to do, when you want to get it done. Hopefully all of you are setting goals, objects, and objectives, where you want to do that. Like, do you want to live in San Diego? Do you want to live in Alaska? Where do you want to live? How you want to get there, and then the why is really the important one. Why do you want to do what you want to do? So if you're going to start a business or design a product, there's some key rules. Customers come first, and the key thing here is when you come up with an idea for a business or a product, the first thing you have to find out is who cares. Ideas are a dime a dozen. I get bombarded daily with, well, I have this idea, I want to do this. One of my business partners is really good at coming up with ideas. What I have to do with them is I go, you know, gee, that's a really good idea, has nothing to do with where we're going today. Let's put that on the shelf. We'll look at it sometime down the road. So ideas are important, but who cares? If it's not commercializable, what do you do with it? And if you're going to build a company, that is your product. If you're going to build a product, what do you want to do with that product? That's a different conversation to have. I learned a long time ago that the greatest reward you can get from your company is the sale of the company. That's where you get the highest leverage points. So another thing, behave with the highest degree of integrity. Your public identity, your reputation is so important in the world. If you compromise that, you'll have a very difficult time building your team of influencers around you to reach the goals that you want to reach. And there are no second chances. Once you burn the bridge, it takes a long time. It takes a lifetime to build a reputation that's solid, and you can destroy it in a heartbeat. So beliefs, and I kind of sense that here, collaboration is the key to success. You don't know everything, you will never know everything, but you can be the leader of those who can make things happen. Accountability, you have to hold yourself accountable. If you set goals and objectives, hold yourself accountable for getting there. Commitment, whatever you decide to do, you've got to put 100% of your energy behind that. You can't waver away from that or you will struggle. And the most important thing here is to become a better listener. I can tell from experience that as I'm speaking here, certain words I'm using are triggering ideas in your mind, and you're already off. You're thinking of other things, about what you're going to say, what you're going to do tomorrow, whatever. That's not being a good listener, but it is human nature. That's the way it is. It happens all the time when I'm talking to my wife. She'll want me to be listening to something, but something that she said triggered another thing in my mind, which now that I'm starting to think about how I'm going to respond when she shuts up so I can speak. So behaviors are beliefs that are turned into action, and that's what delivers results. It's the foundation for changing behaviors. It's linked to the rewards for performance. So when your reward performance here is your grades, right? When you get out in life, your rewards are tied to predominantly financial success. The way you design your business to reward the behaviors that are going to help you accomplish your goals are really key. Action is the execution of specific set of disciplined behaviors and techniques and strategies you must master in order to have a competitive advantage. That's right out of the book, Execution, The Discipline of Getting Things Done. I urge you to take a look at that book. And as a culture, execution begins with the examination of what's really happening, brutal reality. I'm working with a company today that has acquired some technology and some intellectual property. When I acquired that intellectual property, I was told that we had 54 patents worldwide. Well, when you drill down, there's actually 4 fundamental patents. The rest of those patents are just the same patent, but it's been licensed in other countries. So it was painful for me to realize that we didn't have a portfolio of 54 patents. We only have a portfolio of 4 patents, and only one of those patents is licensed, is patented in the United States. So in order to be able to build my business, I have to deal with the brutal reality that is not what we have. So the foundation is not there that I thought was there when I acquired this portfolio. So now we have what I talked about earlier. Every day is a foundation, is a brick in the foundation of your life. What I'm finding with my company now is I've got some loose foundation that has to be shored up. I've got to go back and solidify that so that I have an investable portfolio. A little bit about leaders. Leaders who execute look for deviations from desired managerial tolerances and the gap between the desired and the actual outcome, and everything from profit margins to the selection of people for promotion. One of the challenges with some of the companies I've worked with in the past is early stage companies are usually started with friends and family. So you have the idea guy, and he starts surrounding himself with his friends to help him build the business. Give you a quick example. A friend of mine started a company in the engineering services business. He was a brilliant engineer. He was a software and hardware designer. And he built that up for 11 and a half years. It was doing about $5 million in revenue, and he kept trying to recruit me to come over and help him build his business. I said, I don't understand your business because you reinvent yourself every day. Today you're designing this, tomorrow it's that, the next day I said, I don't know what your public identity is. I'm a product guy. I like to build products because they have leverage. I can make one sale and get repeated business over and over and over from that. So as we started having our conversations on how do we build this engineering services business, number one, I said, well, let's use what we call the sandwich shop theory. If you're going to open a sandwich shop, declare that you have the best Reuben sandwich and then figure out how to make it. People will grant you the dignity you can make an egg salad sandwich or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich if you are the best at something. That's what they'll come to see you for. So I said, what we have to do is define what we're going to be the best at. We decided to use digital video as our platform. And if you guys are all familiar with what DirecTV is, there's a device they call a set-top box that manages the signals from that little satellite dish before it shows up on your screen. We did all the work behind the scenes on those set-top boxes. So if that brand is a Sony, a Panasonic, or whatever, we did all the work underneath the hood. Interesting thing in building that business is that the engineers that helped this company get from 0 to 11 and a half years and $5 million in revenue, they liked that style of, running up and down the hall with your hair on fire and that entrepreneurial feeling. When you start to grow a business with the goal of ultimately selling it, you start changing the way you do business. And so some of those early guys, they didn't want to grow to that business that have that larger bureaucracy to deal with. You come up with different mindsets. But as the leader and the entrepreneur, he had to be prepared for that. That, as we grow, some of my friends are not going to want to continue to ride this train. So that's part of the choice of people. You can't make excuses for, it's because they're your friends, you can't make excuses for their lack of productivity. They're probably not fit for that model anymore. And you have to be strong enough to say, gee, love you dearly, but you're not on this train anymore. We've got to deal with that. As you become leaders, understand that leadership is an action, not a position. Leaders can see negative spaces. This is kind of what I was talking about a few seconds ago. Like a good musician can understand the space between the notes is part of the melody. Business is the same way. You have to understand what's not there as much as what is there in order to be able to take effective action. On results, measurable progress in reasonable time. You all remember how small those desks were when you're in first grade? The reason they make them that small is so they don't fit when you're 18. Right? You've got to be able to design results in advance, understand where you want to go, how long you want to take it to get there, and then hold yourself accountable to be a measured response. And ultimately, success is a refined study of the obvious. What's going on, where I call it being able to understand the market, the drift in the market, so the direction and the velocity. And to be successful, you need to know at what point you can intercept that market with what technology or opportunity you're bringing to it for results. Building a team requires vision, attitude, action, results, personal development, and lifestyle. At the end of the day, the best thing you can do for yourself and for your company is personal development. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. You will constantly grow, and then that you will bring the company with you. Just another little sidebar in terms of selecting people to join you and collaborate with you. Find people who are going to help you get to where you want to go, not people that you think you can afford. So many people make the wrong, they put their budget together and they say, well, I can afford this $35,000 for this person. If they paid $70,000 for the right person, they would probably get to where they want to go, order of magnitude faster. And after I go through these slides, I'll tell you a little bit about my personal experience with that, building my first company. So when I was talking about a philosophy, this isn't old Greek philosophy. This is just little pearls of wisdom I've learned along the way. Success is not something we pursue. It's something we become, and we attract by the person that we become. So you guys have a head start here on all your competition. By the way, your competition are not other schools in the area. Your competition is all over the world. Where you're going, your competition today is in Russia, is in China, is in India, is in Japan. That's where your competition is coming from. You guys have a really good head start being a part of this school. Failure is a few errors in judgment repeated every day. So, if you have a project, and our son was like this, it drove me crazy. He would wait until the 11th hour. He said he could perform better under pressure and get it done. I don't advise that. I think when you have a project, you get started on it now and try to get there before the deadline. And give you an example. Do you have a question, sir? Exactly. Work will always, the statement was, work will always fill the time that is given, and that's exactly true. So if you don't put some guidelines on it for yourself, it will take as long as you have. So when you set goals, very few people actually live their life by inventing the future and designing results in advance. Personal example, when I got out of college, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I wanted to go to college. I was living in an apartment out near San Diego State, and I was surprised to learn how many of the students there were in their 5th year, their 6th year of a 4-year degree, and I'm going, what's going on here? So I decided, here's where I wanted to be in 4 years, and I reverse engineered my path to success so that I could actually get through there in the, quote, allotted time. And at that time, it was predominantly because of costs and expenses, but that kind of set the tone for the rest of my life. Design your results in advance. Then, as this gentleman over here said, your time, you won't fill every day of your life with trying to get to that goal, because you know that if you don't accomplish it in 8 hours each day, your dedicated amount of time, you won't hit the end goal. Just a couple more slides and then we can talk about some of my personal experiences. Attitude is shaped by association. Never underestimate the power and influence. Who are you around? What are they doing to you, and is that okay? That is so evident today, and it's all over the news of what happens to people who get involved in gangs. So that's kind of an extreme measure, but it's the same thing in a high-level school like this. Who do you hang out with? What are they doing to you, and is that okay? Is that helping you get to where you want to go? Are you becoming the best version of yourself by hanging out with those people? So commitment, lifetime learning, permanent innovation, continuous interpretation. And don't read things to find out what happened. There's nothing you can do about the news, right? That's history. That's what happened yesterday. When you read books and you listen to what's going on in the world, use that information to plan what actions you can take to achieve your goals in the future. Any questions so far? Okay, here's a challenge for you. I'll tell you the story of my first business, and then you can see if there's anything in my story that you can link back to what, over a lifetime of work and building multiple companies, I was able to come up with those ideas, those objectives, what I called the organizational philosophy. So when I was in college, I had a very firm focus on what I wanted to do. I'm a commercially rated pilot, and I decided that we're not making real estate anymore, so I wanted to be in real estate. And I felt, since the government only allows commercial pilots to fly 80 hours a month, that's only half time. I'm going to have plenty of time to do my flying and also in real estate. And I was working my way through college in a restaurant, and a gentleman that was dating one of my cocktail waitresses was sitting across the bar from me one day, and he was telling me of an idea about how we can purify oil and reuse it. And it fascinated me, and for some reason, even at that young age, I got a sense that this gentleman didn't know how to run a business, but he had a good idea. And it started me rethinking. So a couple of things happened then. Had I stayed with my original plan to be a pilot and to work in the real estate business, that would have taken me, my first job was in Alaska. And if I'd have gone to Alaska, my son would have never been born, because I never would have married the woman that I was dating at the time, because she probably would, this guy's going to be gone for 3 years to Alaska. I'm going to move on. So the guy with the idea about reclaiming oil, I decided to put my shoulder behind that wheel and try to get that going. And it was quite an interesting run. The idea to reclaim oil, though, was not economically feasible, because at that time, motor oil was very, very cheap. The concept was sound, but you couldn't make any money on it. So I had to do some research, and I found a fluid that was used at that time to cool the electronics packages in the nose cone of the F-14 aircraft. And it sold for $85 a gallon, and when it got contaminated, they just threw it overboard off the aircraft. So A, we had an environmental issue, and B, at $85 a gallon, that was incredibly expensive. And they were using a lot of it in the military. So we focused on on purifying that oil. We built a product line around that, and that we ultimately sold the company. But some of the things along the way that were interesting, when I started the company, we bootstrapped it. I didn't have any idea about how to make things with mills and lathes, and I see you guys have some equipment back here. You got a drill press and a saw and so forth. I'm a farm boy from Idaho. I grew up on a cattle ranch out in the middle of nowhere. My nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. But when you grow up on a ranch like that, you learn how to do anything, and nothing, there's no challenges you don't think that you can take on. So I took this on and quickly learned that I needed a mentor to help make some things. And so I was across the street from my first office. There was a company called National Machine, and I apprenticed myself to them. I gave them a contract to help me make some parts, and with the caveat that they would train me how to do that, how to run a mill, how to run a lathe, how to do these things. Well, as life would happen, we became successful, and then I had to move away to a larger facility. And when I moved to a larger facility, I bought a bunch of equipment, and I thought, hey, I was trained by these guys at National Machine. I'm going to be able to do this myself. And the first bunch of parts that I tried to make, they were all wrong. So I decided I needed to bring in somebody. So I put an ad in the paper for a retired machinist. I didn't think I could afford a guy full time. So I asked for a retired machinist. The gentleman, I got, I think, 6 responses to the ad. The first guy that showed up walks into the interview, and he's got a mahogany toolbox in his hand. And I'm thinking, wow, this guy's really bold. He's bringing his toolbox in. So we sat down and we talked. His name was Wilbur Frank. So when we were done talking, Mr. Frank picks up his toolbox. He's walking back to his truck, and I said, gee, Mr. Frank, why did you bring your toolbox? And he spins around, looks me in the eye, and he says, how do you know the quality of your machinist if you don't check out his tools? The other 5 guys came in for an interview, and none of them brought the toolbox. Guess who I hired? So he came in, and the reason I was making parts wrong because I didn't set the machine up right. See, you don't know what you don't know. So, so I brought Wilbur on, and then he became the trainer for my other machinists. And to shorten the story, we built products for aircraft that's no longer flying. The F-14 is no longer flying. The L-1011 is no longer flying, but the F-18 still takes off over here out of Miramar on a regular basis. And that was the anchor contract that I was able to get that ultimately attracted the attention of a company here in San Diego called Cubic Corporation, and they bought my company. But interesting story about McDonnell Douglas and the F-18. McDonnell Douglas doesn't exist anymore either. It was one of the roll-ups that was purchased by Boeing. But just a fun little side story. I was just about out of business when I flew back to St. Louis, Missouri, the headquarters of McDonnell Douglas. And back then, folks, you didn't have the internet. You couldn't find things. And one of the members on my board told me, you need to talk to the right people back there. And I said, well, how do you find those people? And he said, go to the library and get a book called Contacts Influential. So sure enough, I found the book, and I found a guy. His name was Grant Herford, and he was the guy in charge of ground support equipment, which was what I was building for the F-14. And the F-18 is a sister ship of the F-14 on the aircraft carrier. So I figured there had to be some continuity of equipment between the F-14 and the F-18. So I called up Grant Herford and found out from his secretary that the guy was going to be on vacation. And I didn't have the time to not get back there and hopefully close this contract. So in spite of the fact that the guy I needed to talk to wasn't going to be there, I flew back there, walked into the engineering office, and announced myself. At that time, I was 27 years old. I walk up to the desk, and I said, I'm here to see Mr. Herford. And the lady was very polite. She said, she called upstairs, and the call comes back, says, Mr. Herford's not here. And so I kind of panicked. I knew he wasn't there, but I had to have a line. I said, well, gee, my secretary, which I didn't even have a secretary at the time, I said, my secretary must have made a mistake. We've scheduled for me to fly out from San Diego to here. There must be something that can be done. And so she calls upstairs. I guess I looked pathetic enough. She started to feel sorry for me. So she calls upstairs, and pretty soon 2 engineers come down. And in the lobby of that engineering room, I caught their attention on what I was trying to accomplish. And I was invited back to talk about contracts. So I came back in about 2 weeks, and I was meeting in the headquarters of the building, of the organization. And as you walk into the lobby, there was a big, beautiful wall, and there was pictures of all of the aircraft that McDonnell had made and the McDonnell Douglas organization had made. And there was a sign that said, museum. So I had about 30 minutes to wait. I walked around the back of that wall to the museum, and there's a little white-haired gentleman about 5'4", 5'5", standing there talking to a lovely young lady, and I decided I was going to be bold enough and go up and introduce myself. It happened to be that was Mr. McDonald. And about an hour later, I'm sitting in an office with the procurement officers and the engineers and so forth. And as I walked in and introduced myself, I just said, gosh, this is one of the greatest days of my life. I just had an opportunity to meet Mr. McDonald, and he loves the project that we're doing. I was out of there in about 30 seconds. The contracts were signed. The deal went through. That gave me the courage to propose to my wife. I get married, come back from Hawaii after our honeymoon, and there was an offer to buy my company. And that all happened in a period of less than 6 months. So that's the story of my first company. I went on to do other companies after that in the agricultural business, in what you guys would call high tech. I built communication subsystems for high-end computers. You guys probably don't know about Sun Microsystems, but at one time it was a rock star up in Silicon Valley. They were one of my largest customers. And so the rest is history. Today I'm working in a company building a device to exceal the pace of wounds. These are chronic wounds. I originally wanted to help our wounded warriors, and I was redirected to use this technology to heal chronic wounds. And 5 years ago, I didn't know what a chronic wound was. Chronic wounds are caused usually by some kind of a disease, and they're very painful and slow to heal. A lot of them are caused, probably almost 90% are caused by diabetes. And I didn't realize, what the volume of those wounds are in the United States. 2% of the population have chronic wounds. That's an amazing number. And people are suffering. So what I'm doing today is I'm using a very small microcurrent that replicates the body's own bioelectrical systems to help accelerate the pace of healing. Yes, ma'am.
What is a chronic wound? I don't know what that is. I know what a
I'm sorry. Did I misspeak?
no. I'm just asking. I don't know what a chronic wound is.
Okay. So neither did I. So wounds. When I wanted to help the wounded warriors, most of our military people are, in their late teens, early 20s. They're young. They're robust. Their bodies can heal rapidly, and those wounds caused by battlefield issues are called acute wounds. If you cut your hand, that is an acute wound. A chronic wound is something that just occurs on your body due to some problem with the body's natural system, usually caused by poor circulation. So you can close the wound but not heal the wound. So sometimes it takes months to heal the wound underneath, but it will close. So first thing you have to get it closed so that you can prevent infection. Those wounds for most chronic wounds occur below the knee. That just seems that's the area where the blood has the most difficulty in getting back through the system. The vascular system becomes compromised. So what we do with our electrical signals is we encourage the body to do specific things. One, we down-regulate the S100 family of genes, which causes inflammation. The other thing we do is we recruit stem cells to the site of injury, and we cause the body to release key proteins essential in wound healing. And there's a book that was written, I think, in the late 70s called The Body Electric by Dr. Becker. If you're interested, you can look that up. Electrical signals of the body, we've known about them as a society since the 1800s. And you're familiar with a lot of what electrical signals will do. For example, the first electrical stimulation device was a pacemaker, right? To keep the heart working, to keep you vertical. Now there's all kinds of devices on the market that cause muscle contraction. They're called a TENS device. For example, you can find on late night TV this thing that you can strap around your stomach and give you six-pack abs in 37 seconds. That's all a bunch of smoke and mirrors. But there is an electrical system in your body that keeps you vertical. The mind sends a signal to your heart, to the sinus node, that causes your heart to beat in that synchronous way, the atria and then the ventricles. It also sends signals to, like I said, cause the body to grow new blood vessels and so forth. Did I answer your question? Okay. Anything else? Well, hopefully I was able to share something useful for you today. And congratulations on being members of this school. Yes, ma'am. No. No, I didn't. So after I sold my last company, I've spent a lot of time with Connect. Are you familiar with Connect? There's a program that started about 30 years ago. At that time it was called UCSD Connect. It was after we had a big economic downturn in the San Diego area. The leaders in the community got together with the university and said, we've got to do something about tying our academia to industry. And so I spent a couple of years going every day doing consulting work with entrepreneurs to help them figure out how to write their business plans and so on and so forth. And I screened 120 companies. I selected what I felt were the top 10% that were investable opportunities, and I started to go into the investment community to raise funds for those group of companies. And at an investors conference, I ran into a guy with an intellectual property portfolio that intrigued me, and it was about this healing. All right, so I'm a business guy. I'm not a doctor. I look at things and how can you commercialize this and make money out of it. But being a Marine, I wanted, like I said earlier, I wanted to help the wounded warriors, and it was the Armed Forces Institute of Regenerative Medicine, which is a grant basically with hundreds of millions of dollars tied to it by the Department of Defense and the major branches of the service. They fund research institutes mostly affiliated with universities, and it was headquartered back then at Wake Forest University. And Dr. Benjamin Harrison listened to my story and what I was trying to do. I wanted to give him equipment to say, hey, test this with some of your research, and give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Does this thing work? Doesn't it work? Type of thing. And he's the one that told me to go take a look at chronic wounds and said, the VA has a serious issue with this. Would you go look at them and see if you can help them? So we're working with the VA here in La Jolla and at the VA in Cincinnati, Ohio. So we're down the road making these things happen now. We have a product that's ready to be commercialized. And so that how I got into it is I found somebody with an idea. And again, like my very first company, I sensed that this guy didn't know how to take this and commercialize these patents. So I guess that's my gift. I figure out how to map technology to markets. I mean, that one question I said, when you come up with an idea for a company or a product, ask yourself, who cares? Any other questions? Well, thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming. I think some of the takeaways we've heard from other CEOs and other speakers here: lifelong learning, continue to do your passion, reimagine today, and create tomorrow. And I think you highlighted all of those points, and we thank you so much again for speaking, enriching our program, serving us in the country. And that's it. You can go to your second period classes. Thank you.